Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's Toast to the Art Show. Every third Saturday, we get excited to chat with Victoria Chick. She is an amazing artist. She's a contemporary figurative artist, not only just an artist, but an early 19th and 20th century print collector. And she's based in Silver City, New Mexico, which is an awesome art destination. So many galleries, studios, art events. And it's based in the southwest corner of the state, of the land of enchantment. And it's also the gateway community to the Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument, the Gila Wilderness area. So definitely a place to put on your travel list if you travel in the Southwest. And I encourage you to go to Victoria's website. It's victoriachick.com. One thing also about Victoria is that her and a team of awesome people, this is because it's an awesome project, so I'm going to use that word awesome quite a bit. They are working on developing the Southwest Regional Museum of Art and Art Center in Silver City. That's just that final cornerstone that is really needed to be placed to make this the ultimate art destination. If you're an art community, you've got to have that fine art museum. So we're excited about the work they're doing, and we're going to be doing some shows just on what's happening in the development, so stay tuned for that. But today she is joining us to talk about presidential portraits, especially in the National Portrait Gallery. And I was telling her earlier, I didn't even know we had a portrait gallery. So our article about this is on blendradioandtv.com. You can see the link in the show notes. From there, you'll be able to see some of the images we talk about. So welcome back, Victoria. How are you doing?
Thank you, Lisa. Oh, I'm glad to be back. I was amazed yesterday because we had a blizzard here, which I have not seen since in the 18 years I've been in New Mexico. But the sun is out today, and we're enjoying it to the fullest.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. Enjoy that, because I know our weather is going to change where we are up in North Carolina. I know we've had some warm temperatures that we were very excited about, but it's going to swap over. So I'm just saying, thanks for sending us that storm. It's coming. It's on its way now. So
anytime.
Yeah, right. But this is exciting. I can't wait to talk about the museum down the road. I know so many things are happening, so we've got to do some shows as soon as you guys are all ready. But presidential portraits. So here it is, this National Portrait Gallery. So that kind of ties in with the importance of these museums and places. And I didn't know that we had a National Portrait Gallery, but some of these paintings are also in other galleries and museums across the country, right?
Right. I have heard of it, but I have never visited it, and I never really thought about it actually, because when somebody says, let's go look at a museum full of portraits, I don't know if I'm interested in that, because that my conception, my portraits is that they're going to all look basically the same. And when I really started looking into this topic and looked up the National Portrait Gallery, I was really amazed, and I was sorry that I'd never seen it yet. So I've got to make it a point to visit the National Portrait Gallery. If you're like me and you think portraits are all the same, you will be amazed because they're not all the same. And there are many, many ways of doing portraits that most people don't even know about.
Yeah, this is interesting looking at them, because you were talking about, you've got oil paintings, there's sculpture, clay, of course there's photography, but there's caricatures too, which that's my favorite. Nancy was saying that too, and Nancy would normally be here, but just we're dividing and conquering as we do all these new radio shows. So everyone check out our new platform at bigblendradio.com. Sorry, I had to throw a plug in there. So I just had to. We're doing a whole bunch of new things. But I think that is really, just interesting about, we're back to the egg tempera that we were talking about the other. Yes. One of our last interviews, we were talking about artists using egg tempera, and I think it was Lyndon Johnson was egg tempera on a wood panel. But before we get into that part,
Yeah,
I want to say,
yes. Yeah, that was done. That particular portrait was done by Peter Hurd, who was a New Mexican artist. I'll point out, and he was very famous. He studied with Andrew Wyeth,
oh
and
wow,
he married Andrew Wyeth's daughter. Was one thing, but he was very much noted for his work in egg tempera, and he liked that medium because it gave him the ability to do great detail. Well, there's an interesting story about him painting Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson did not want to waste time, in his opinion, sitting for a portrait, and so he very begrudgingly. And we've talked about how tedious egg tempera is and how slow it is to develop a painting in it. Well, Lyndon Johnson gave him one sitting, and it was for less than an hour. And then he wouldn't sit anymore. So, of course, he did sketches and so forth, but he had to rely on photographs to complete the portrait. Well, I don't know whether it was exaggerated or not, but as I said, Hurd was noted for his detail. Well, he made a very detailed portrait of Johnson that showed up all of the flaws of his features and his skin. And so when it was done, it was like a 3/4 portrait, and it showed the Capitol in the background and a lot of sky and stuff. And it was a well done portrait. But when Johnson saw it, he said, "That's the ugliest thing I have ever seen."
oh my gosh,
and he refused to accept it. So there were some other portraits done of Johnson, but anyway, that particular painting was eventually given to the National Portrait Gallery because the first one would have hung in the White House.
but that Johnson didn't like it.
The White House also has a collection of portraits but it's probably not as complete as the one at the National Portrait Gallery. So that's the story on that one. And the one stipulation about that was that he had to wait until after Johnson died for it to be exhibited.
Oh,
and I don't know if that was Peter Hurd's. I don't know if that was Peter Hurd's stipulation or if it was President Johnson's stipulation.
Wow, I have no idea. And I Peter Hurd. I know you've talked about him on the show. I know we've discussed him on the show before, Peter Hurd. And isn't there a Hurd Gallery? Oh, I'm thinking of the one in Prescott, maybe. Hurd Museum, maybe that's what I'm thinking. But I wonder about that, if the artist is like, listen, I painted this. Like, how we talk about public art, how, it's like once an artist is commissioned and says that's what they're going to do, it's like whether you like it or not. Remember, there was the one artist you were talking about with the big sculpture, and people complained about how they had to walk around it. It was kind of like that in a way. This is kind of a form of public art in a way when you look at it, So that's fascinating to me about Johnson. You didn't give the guy the time, but at the same time, he had stuff he was doing. Johnson was busy, but I wanted to go to not only just, is it egg tempera or is it oil painting that, all these different forms or caricatures, but also, when we think about portraits, some things I think about those portraits where here I am, here's my headshot, basically.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm always regal, or there could be the family one. And don't get me started on the Arnold Feeney wedding portrait again from last month. Everyone, you've still got it. If you haven't heard that yet, you need to go back and check it out. The Arnold Feeney, Nancy and I still see stuff in there. That's just like one of the trippiest paintings we've ever talked about. But, there's just the posing and how you capture things. It's like when someone wants a dog portrait, a horse portrait, do you have the dog or horse just sit and stare at you? Or is the portrait of them moving around and doing things, right? So I want to go to Teddy Roosevelt, because this one, and John Singer Sargent, the artist, I've heard of him too. He's pretty famous, isn't he? Or is it?
Oh, yes.
I'm hearing it from you. It's all your fault that I recognize these names, I'm just
Oh,
saying.
good. Yeah. Well, here you have, if you think about portraiture, going to have your picture taken, let's say, and you're going in cold turkey to a portrait artist, usually a photographer, and you don't know them and he doesn't know you. So, and you want to be there because that's why you went in, to have your picture taken. But when in a situation like a presidential portrait, a lot of times the presidents were shy about having their picture painted, or they were a busy man and they felt they couldn't give it that much time. So there was very little time for the person who was going to do the painting to develop a rapport between him and the sitter. So it was that the portrait painter had to be kind of intuitive, I think, to pick up the personality of the president and how that president wanted to be seen, how this artist was going to show him in his best light. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. And in the case of Theodore Roosevelt, who thought, he was a very active man. He considered himself to be a very masculine kind of man, and into being rugged, let's just say. So he had a painting done, and I can't remember who the artist was, but Roosevelt's family said, that's not going to work because he's made you look like a cat that's mewing. And so he rejected that supposedly official portrait. He rejected it completely, and he contacted John Singer Sargent, who was a very famous painter at that time and still is. So John Singer Sargent followed him around the White House, trying to adjust, to see what the light was like in various places and what the background would be like in various places. And so they were wandering all over the White House, and Sargent was sketching all the time, but Roosevelt was getting pretty impatient and excused him. He said, "You don't have a clue as what you're looking for." And so Sargent kind of didn't like that, and so he fired kind of a sarcastic comment after that, saying that Roosevelt didn't have a clue as what the artist needed to do the portrait. So they weren't really getting along, and at one point, there's a historical recording of a incident where he was being sketched. Roosevelt was walking ahead of him very fast and reached the staircase first and put his hand on the balustrade to go, as if to go up. And anyway, he said, you don't know what I need. And basically the artist said. And so Roosevelt, with his hand still on the baluster, swirled around and said, "Oh, don't I?" So that was the pose, that because he was angry when he turned around, and he looked pretty aggressive, and which is how he wanted to look, really. So at that point, at that moment, Sargent realized that was the perfect pose, and so Roosevelt got his portrait officially done after that, using that pose. So,
well, that's because he was known. He was the bully with the big stick.
Yeah. He was bully was one of his favorite phrases to use, and that he meant it was good, it was strong, and it was good. So anyway, that portrait is a really interesting one, I think.
I think it's good, and even I was looking at one of Lyndon Johnson by Peter Hurd, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And what I think is interesting about this is we're looking at it's kind of like where the right brain and the left brain work, connect.
It's if you look online, look up the National Gallery and look portraits of Lyndon Johnson, you'll see a number of them, and you'll see the ones that Johnson liked, plus this one that he didn't like. And I think this is a great painting.
Yeah.
Johnson didn't like it because he doesn't look glamorous in any way in that painting. He looks strong, I think.
I think so.
As a president should. But anyway, who knows?
Well, I think Bill Clinton's one, now that's interesting because it gets into digital art. So we're now showing the time, sign of the times,
yes,
which was interesting. But I mean, that's I think you say in the article that it's 9 by 7 feet, so best to see from a distance. So even when we're looking at on our computers or phones, we're not getting the full effect, you know?
Right. You have to be back from that kind of painting, back probably 15 or 20 feet to really see it as a portrait of Clinton. Because if you're up too close, all you're seeing is these bunch of color. It doesn't make sense when you're up close.
You know, that's so interesting how art has morphed, you know?
Yeah.
And how now we have things that are paintings that you can only see online, you know?
Yes.
All of this kind of, it's a whole new world, you know? And so that's part of art history is like, oh, what did we have? Way back when we had egg tempera. Now we still use it once in a while. And if someone does, it's like, oh my God, stop everything. Somebody used egg tempera. Meantime, around the corner, we're doing everything digital. But this was still a painting. It's like a painting merged with digital art at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, it was when computers were first being commonly used. So he's using that pixel type of arrangement but it's not really pixels. And so he's influenced by the digital art, but it's not really using it. And then you come up even closer in time to a portrait I didn't discuss in the article, and that is the artists. There's a recent presidents who are actually having their official portrait painted, or not painted, their official portrait done with digital cameras, and then inkjet printed. I mean, so that's very very recent technology, and I was really surprised when I saw it because, like I said, when I heard about the National Portrait Gallery, I sort of expected it's going to be all headshots and all oil paintings, and it certainly isn't that way.
Wow, that's. I mean, you had to have fun doing this because there's some quirky stories here. Like that's what's so cool about this. So John F. Kennedy, JFK. So now we get into Elaine de Kooning, another artist I've heard of.
Yes.
And that was kind of that to me was different because he's sitting, you know, he's a little more relaxed, but it's also got, you know, the color work and the brush strokes. I would not have expected that art but maybe at that time, you know, you understand abstract art far more than I do. But I just wouldn't have, I don't know. I don't know why I wouldn't expect it. I mean, just like the digital art is also kind of abstract to me. But would you have thought a presidential portrait would have abstract? I'm not saying it's wrong or not good. It's just interesting.
You know, the Kennedys were a modern couple. I don't know, but what they weren't. Maybe the first couple in the White House that you consider, you know, modern, our age exactly. But they were interested in all the arts. They were interested in music. They were interested in theater. They were interested in opera. They were interested in visual art, and they were well acquainted with a lot of the contemporary artists that were working at the time. And I think this one is interesting because of the fact that Elaine de Kooning, who was chosen by them to do this painting, was never considered herself a portrait artist. She was an expressive artist. In fact, she was married to Jackson Pollock. So we've
That's
talked
right.
about
That's why I know her name. That's
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
She unfortunately, she was married to him because he was too famous, and it put her in as good as she was. It put her always kind of in the shadow of Jackson Pollock. But she was selected by the Kennedys to do this official portrait, and she spent a year doing different portraits of him. Some where he was sitting, some where she did sketches and worked from them later. Her brushwork is very typical of expressive brushwork, and so is her color, because we in an official portrait, you probably wouldn't expect to see the president as painted in green. But
or have brushstrokes over his face, or kind of word over him.
So she's using a typical expressionist approach to painting him, and it's for a pretty big painting too.
Yeah, I agree.
There are some of the other presidential portraits have been large too, so that isn't new. But she took advantage of using a large canvas. Now she had this enormous studio that she worked in, and you can see a picture. You may be able to see a picture of it if you look online under Elaine de Kooning President Kennedy, and you will probably see a picture of her working in her studio on these portraits. She's got many of them lined up, many. And so one of them that she worked on, besides the one that's in the National Gallery that is in the article, was a 9-foot tall portrait of President, and that now hangs in the Truman Library.
Nancy and I have to go there because it's on the Jefferson Highway.
Yes.
The Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. We're going to have to do that, I think, this year. We'll just add that to the list.
Okay.
We'll do as best we can. But I want to go to Gerald Ford, the clay caricature. See, seriously, I love. He looks so happy.
Yeah.
I want to pinch his cheeks. I really do. And, it's so interesting. We saw a really good sculpture of his wife. He has a museum in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Okay. And we saw a really good sculpture of his wife, and she's looking out, and it just, I have to send you that photo because I don't know. I love those sculptures, the bronze, just, there's just something. I think when you have to take color away and work with one medium, there's this extra challenge to it. You know what I mean? And maybe that comes in the glazing. Oh, there's another topic for us, Victoria. Working in one color. Yeah, because really, when you think about it, even with the clay caricature of him,
it's a challenge. The clay sculpture that you're talking about hangs on a wall. And I don't know if everybody today that's alive today knows who Patrick Oliphant is, because he's no longer living, but he was a political cartoonist, and you used to see Oliphant political cartoons in all the big newspapers, every week. He would have some biting comment via a cartoon, and a lot of the presidents really appreciated Patrick Oliphant. And now that I think of it, President Truman really liked Patrick Oliphant because Patrick Oliphant probably had Democrat tendencies. And so Truman at the time I was in the Truman Library anyway, there were all kinds of Patrick Oliphant cartoons displayed. So it was neat. But he, as I say, he had Democrat leanings, and so his caricature of Gerald Ford, who was a Republican, is really interesting to me. But I think it's my favorite. But Oliphant was nice because he got along with everybody. He didn't. He was never. He may not agree with you, but he was never ever mean about it. And
You know,
so,
you know what I think? It's kind of like comedians that roast people.
yeah,
You know, and if you go get roasted, you know you're going in to get bashed, but it's done. Take you.
these are your friends. They're doing this, and so
It's like,
you know
yeah,
that
your friends are ribbing you. It's like in
yes,
your family, like everyone knows, oh, here she goes. She's going in for that second slice of cake. Now, if somebody else did it, it would be like, why are you being like that?
yeah,
You're being
right,
rude. But listen, you good-natured ribbing is good. I'm just saying, oh. Yeah, but come
that's
on,
right.
I think these, the cartoons and caricatures, but I just think it's so cool to see a caricature done in clay,
Yes,
you know?
yes, yes, it is.
Uh,
We're used to seeing impressive, try to be lifelike sculpture done in clay, and then or as a precursor to being having a bronze made or something like it. But it's always very realistic. So this is off the cuff almost.
yeah.
I really liked this particular clay of Oliphants.
I love it. To me, it is my favorite out of them all. Though I do like the Teddy Roosevelt one. But honestly, it's just my favorite because it's different
Yeah.
and fun. But I do want to see I would like to have seen Roosevelt looking like he's a mewing cat. Honestly, come on, that would be fun to
Yeah.
see. But the face that Gerald Ford's happy, that.
That went
But
probably pretty good.
but when you think about caricature art, how it was in newspapers and like cartoons, and it was, you can go to museums now and people used to cut out cartoons and keep them,
Mhm. Yeah.
I would always go to the funnies because just that one chuckle of it just can make your day,
Yeah.
and you
Right.
can go back to it. But when it was just newspapers, sometimes magazines too, right? And if you're into comics, like you'd buy things that were, like Archie and Jughead or whatever. But Marvel Comics, look how big that is. But
Yeah.
when you it was just almost like it's almost like streaming music now. Here's your song and now it's gone kind of thing. Instead of something it's like temporary art. Yet it wasn't really temporary, but if it was a newspaper, it was like here for the day and gone the next day. And to me, that was really always a difficult thing about the art that people do to make someone laugh through one or two or maybe 6 blocks, if you're lucky, depending on the
Yeah.
newspaper.
Yeah.
There's another topic, Victoria, because
Yeah. Well,
you have to
you're
do
right.
so much,
Yeah. You're
and
right.
so the clay is
there's
more
been
lasting.
there's been some fabulous cartoonists, and both serial cartoonists and people who are political cartoonists, and I think they've come to realize that because so many of these folks now have saved their cartoons and they're turning them into books, so they aren't lost. That people can go back and see what was done years before. So I've been buying these books a lot because even if the topic is 20 years old or 30 years old, it's still funny because it's human nature. They're usually pointing out the foibles of human nature to us. So
Well,
I
it's even
appreciate
just
that.
like Mad Magazine. As a kid, I
Yes.
didn't always get all the stuff that they were talking about, but you just even Biff Baff Boom, like that to me was just saying Biff Baff was funny.
Yeah.
Just even the sound effects that they would have to create. Oh, Victoria, you have to do this as your next topic. Come on, it's huge. Caricature and cartoon art is so massive,
Okay.
and I know. I'm just like, now I'm going,
Well, we
'cause
may have
even
to
like
break
the
it up.
Far
We
Side,
may have to break
yeah,
it up a little bit.
I know. Here we go.
So that
It
topic
gets,
is so huge, and there's so many wonderful cartoonists that we might have to make a series or something.
okay, I'm all good with that because it'll just make us laugh. Okay, because it's so cool when you look at these, these pieces, but when you do think it's wonderful now about the books, but think about back in the day of how these had to be printed and were they going to be full color, black and white? How did all of that history of putting
Right.
comedy in a block? Because especially
Yeah.
back in the day when you were hand pressing, the hand
Yes.
press. And so you didn't have like, oh, here, let's just do this, because of the actual physical labor of printing something. So I want to go to the very beginning. Like, I want the beginning of time. Like, who made someone laugh in print first without
Well,
all these words, just going biff baff. I want my biff baff. I don't know who said biff baff first, but anyway, it's especially, like the Far Side is still funny to me. That's, anyway,
right. Well, Far Side,
yeah.
yeah. Gary Larson.
It's just also because they knew it was temporary.
Yeah.
And especially at that time, you may have your original and keep it, but how did you even store it as an artist? How did you, and be able to also churn out so much so fast? I mean, that's why Sunday papers were such a big deal, because somebody would work on that for so long. Anyway, I've gone off topic, but listen, comedy and presidents go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's so funny, and please don't anybody get mad at me, because this is not a political, I'm not being politically correct, and I'm not being politically mean, but this is just what went through my brain. And I'm not saying that Clinton was a good or a bad president, but it is funny, because when I clicked on the photo, the link to go to the digital art of him, it goes Bill Clinton by Chuck Chase, 2006, they give the whole thing. But they said the 42nd president, and I went 42nd, like he was only in office for 40 seconds. Sorry, and that was exactly what went through my brain. I'm like, when was he only in office for 40 seconds? I'm sorry, that's really dumb. But as soon as I said 40 seconds, I was like, what? Anyway, sorry. Anyhow.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I know. I thought it was pretty funny, but I'm not, just don't send me the emails, because I just, I don't care. But it's just funny. It's like the molecular man, the 32nd, man or whatever. But this has been a fun conversation and a fun topic for sure to just look at. At the end, in closing on this, I do want to say though, you make a interesting point at the end of your story. You talk about how back in the day this was covered, in federal funding. But now presidents have to get donors for their paintings, who does the specific party, like if it's a Democrat, president, like we've got Biden now.
No, it's probably, there's probably a small number of people who are wealthy, who voted for a particular president, and they will say, we need to have a presidential portrait, and they will pony up the money to have it done. And I don't know how long that's been there, because probably early on, the president himself or his family had the portrait painted.
But, I see.
But now see, there's sometimes a confusion between the National Portrait Gallery, and then there's a portrait gallery in the White House too, and there's a portrait, say President X has a portrait done, it goes to the National Gallery. President X has a portrait done, it goes to the White House. And there are a lot of portraits. Some are very formal, some are informal. There's a really nice one of George Bush, who's kind of just sitting in his home, and he's just in shirt sleeves, and he's relaxed, and it looks really great. And then there's another one where he's much more formal, and he's got a suit on, and he's looking stern, so every president, I guess, every president, like all of us, we have different personas depending on where we are and what we're doing. And so sometimes we look friendly, sometimes we are kind of cranky looking, and it's the same way with the portraits. And I think it's really neat to have so many, because they give you an idea of what that person's personality was really like.
It's a day in the life. It's like the day in the life. Yeah.
What was going on at the time they had their portrait painted?
Yeah. I mean, to me, well, look at, courtroom artists, what they have to do. I mean, that to me, that's still fascinating to me, that we still have that with the sketching versus, and we have cameras now and film. but we still have that. Because, and there's something about catching the personal, those emotion, there's an emotion that
Yes.
happens with art. And like you were saying about George Bush, I think somebody should be doing a painting of him painting, because he should be painting these presidential portraits. He's good. Like, he's an amazing
Yeah.
artist. You know,
Yeah.
he just
And there,
really is
yeah.
good.
Yeah. And what, you wonder sometimes what was going on nationally or internationally at the time somebody was having their portrait painted, and is what was happening around them in real life, is that expressed in any way in their personality during the time that their portrait was painted. So anyway, you could, if you want to study up on it, you could read a lot into the portrait that might not be obvious when you look at it the first time.
I like going on the National Gallery National Portrait Gallery's website, because they give you a little history of the artist. They do a good job telling you
Yes.
who,
And
what, and where.
You know something, Lisa? We're talking about presidential portraits today, but the National Portrait Gallery has lots more besides presidential portraits, because they have portraits of anybody who's in the news, anybody who's well known, anybody who's done anything in their lives that's worth talking about. They have portraits of much more than presidents.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And even when you were saying about what was going on in that day with the president, like, I mean, would there be a painting of like JFK during the Bay of the Pigs? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
what was going on at that time? It's just so fascinating to me. And I wonder if that's why like pastels became such a big deal, that you could do more, with pastel quickly. Like, what, isn't that kind of what they use in courtroom drawings? It's like like charcoal, maybe. I don't know what they're using. They don't seem to have that much color to them.
No,
in a courtroom.
Yeah, they don't.
Huh. And then they're
using pretty basic art materials, pretty basic stuff, because they have to work so fast.
Yeah, it's like the people that do the criminal pictures, like the mock-ups, like when someone tells them this is what this guy did and he mugged me, you look like this.
Yeah.
And they draw according to what the victim or the witness saw. Wow.
That's a different kind, because they're trying to get a facsimile of what somebody actually looked like, and it's like a mugshot.
Right.
And the courtroom artist is more trying to capture emotion, I think, because you usually have somebody there who's a sketch artist, because the trial is very dramatic, or the crime is very dramatic, and so they're looser usually than the police artist work.
See, we got another topic: law and order.
Oh gosh!
I know she's gonna I'm not coming back on a show. Here's 10 more.
I hope you're writing these down.
I know, right? Really.
It's later.
I know, for sure. Victoria, always a pleasure. I mean, we always learn so much. I mean, it's never ending. I mean, it's just, art is, I think you make art history fun, because
I hope so.
You hear the term art history and you're all like, oh God, I have to sit and be lectured to. And it's not. It's really, it is gossip, and how gossip was portrayed at the time. But it always blows my mind of how art really tells the time, tells the sign of the times, what was going on. And so does music and literature. The arts, we've got to take care of our arts and fund them where we can. It's so important that we, do that to preserve the history and, help the present time to educate and to understand. And then we look at the future, and art will always dictate what has happened, and interpret, I should say, not dictate, interprets. So it's awesome. Yeah. Everyone, Victoria Chick.
I'm glad to hear you saying that, because this is sort of what I'm always parroting, and I always like to hear somebody else express it. So
yeah, it's true. I mean, it's true, and I know what you're doing with the museum in Silver City is huge. It's a huge endeavor to go. Oh, No, I'm not just going to do a little museum on the side. This is a fine art museum, and that is like that's a big deal. And I think it's really going to be huge for Silver City, but also for the state. New Mexico has the New Mexico True motto. It is a land of enchantment. The arts is so huge in New Mexico. It's massive. And you've got Taos, you've got Santa Fe, obviously Albuquerque, and to have Silver City really flourish with the arts too. It just it makes the state stronger. It makes the immediate community stronger, but also the surrounding region. So power to you with what you're doing. Yeah, it's important. So again, everyone, VictoriaChick.com is the website to keep up with Victoria. She is here every third Saturday, so keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. And her article, again, so you can click through to the images, is on blendradio and tv.com. Just type in the search box presidential portrait and you'll see it. Thanks so much, Victoria. Have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you, Lisa, and tell Nancy hi for me.
She says hi.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay.